Um, but yeah, I mean, I think you're the first guest I'm gonna have on that I actually have met in person.
Have we met in person?
Yeah, we met the first time I ever did went to Riders of the Riverbend. I wasn't a author yet. I went there and I saw you. You were selling your novels. You hadn't made
Right.
comics yet, and you sold out of everything. So whenever I got there, you were like, I just have this like one thing, and I died in a bed of roses, I think.
Okay. That's all I
Um,
have left.
that's all you. I think you had a few others, but it was like it was
Yeah.
definitely you were one of the better sellers, I think, at the event. Because I remember then talking to other people they were. I was like, oh, how is this? Anybody selling anything? They're like, no. Like that guy is
Yeah.
the only one. But
Yeah.
that was a while
I,
ago. That I want to say
uh,
that was like 20, I don't know, 14 or something like that. 2015, I don't know.
Probably a little later than that. I think I started doing comics right after that. That would have been, I think I started doing comics in 2018. So it probably was somewhere, I think the first year I did that. I've only done that show once. Poor Sarah
Okay.
invites me every single year. And what happens is she has the same date, which is, let's just say it's the first weekend of August every year.
Yeah.
There's always a Chicago convention scheduled, flashback weekend scheduled for the first weekend of August. So I end up being double booked um,
Yeah.
every year. So I've only ever been able to do her show one time, and it's local. And I wish I could do it. I wish it wasn't that. I wish the schedule wasn't conflicting like that because I really want to support
No,
her
yeah, I
going
agree. And
more
that's the thing. She
often.
does it at like a peak summer. Yeah, like you said, I think it's like August, and then also again in October. And there's always another convention that's going on that um, I like. One of the years it was right during New York Comic Con in October, so I couldn't make it then. But yeah, it is nice because yeah, that's tr about as local as they get for us. Um, literally our like neighborhood. Where Stat at that Mavis Coffee was. I lived there for basically like a block away for a couple of years.
Yeah, I live right down the street from it. I live down in East Alton, so I'm only maybe 5 minutes away from the coffee shop. So yeah, I'm pretty close, and yeah, it sucks that I can't support her more. She's awesome. That
Yeah,
she
I'll have to
owns that
bring her on
whole
the channel.
yeah, she owns that whole Old Milton Schoolhouse and does lots of art stuff there.
Yeah,
I
they got a lot going on there. And then my other neighbor, he now owns like Warhammer. They have like a Warhammer collectibles and shop right next to it now. So yeah, it's becoming kind of the hub for that. I haven't been over there now because I'm now on the other side of St. Louis. But enough about
right.
us and the localities. I just kind of wanted to sort of how I do this with everybody, but it's kind of like I give a rundown of what I know of your career, and then you fill in the gaps. But you're one of the eventually we'll get to the comics, especially since that's like the up to current moment part of your career. But you
Yeah.
have a vast history in filmmaking that I want to cover all that first. Because
Yeah. Sure.
before I even met you, whenever I want to say, it's funny now that we kind of see ourselves as around the same age. But whenever I was in high school, you were out of high school and you were like the person that was doing big things, making independent movies. And
It was kind of the whole scene that kind of grew up around my my movies and my filmmaking and convention hopping and stuff. There was a moment in probably 2008 leading into 2009 where there were probably five or six local, and I mean this side of the river, local guys making independent films, taking them to conventions, and we were all going to set up and do our own film festival at the Tivoli. At one point, we contacted them, asked them how much it would be to rent out the theater. They gave us a price, and then it just never. We could never sort of get it together. And then everybody one at a time sort of stopped making movies as we got older, and about how indie movies are. It's tough to stick with it because
I
they're
know.
time consuming, and there's very little very little you get out of very little appreciation for all that hard work out there in the world.
Yeah, and I didn't. I was so whenever you're like basically the St. Louis filmmaking scene, I sort of in high school was starting to break in. And that's when you start to meet like the other independent filmmakers. Most of the guys all did full-time kind of media gig work or they were freelancers and then they were doing the independent films 100% as hobbies. And
Right.
but it was still for me it was like a chance to be on a set where people,
Mhm.
it's not quite the same as when you have like there were some times that I was able to go and do the people that were doing like commercials that I don't do you remember that studio that I don't remember the name of it and I'm not sure if it's even still around but it was like just a whole full-blown studio. It was all green screen walls and it was like the only one around if you didn't like it was like anything else you had to rent a space in a corporate building I feel like. But anyway, so like there was a lot of shoots that happened there and they were always like commercials and you could be like an extra. And so I started to meet people, but you were kind of one of the few. There was maybe like three other groups of people that were making independent horror films. And and you were kind of one of the main guys.
Yeah.
So you were like locally kind of known, but then once you sort of got into it and started being involved in it, I never really learned um how you actually make money with the films. And a lot of people were like, well, you kind of don't. And unless you make them with nothing. And but now coming full circle, you made at how many films did you make in with Hack Movies? Like 10?
Seven. Seven.
7? I
Yeah.
think I've seen like
Plus,
five,
plus
at
a,
least five.
plus a ton of like skits and shorts and things like that that go. It's like a dozen if you count all the little things that we did. But
Okay, yeah,
that's
you
the
had
thing. Like
like Nixon and Hogan Meet Christmas, which might not have been a feature, but
that
that was
was a feature. But we had stuff like Nixon and Hogan and Time Travel Sucks. That's like 6 minutes long or 8 minutes long. But I don't count it as a movie because we did it in one day. It's one set, one location. It's just me and the guy that plays Nixon, and we play our future selves arguing with each other. And it's funny because some people make a 6 minute movie and say my film is done, and I present it to the world. I do 6 minutes, and I'm like, that doesn't count. So I don't even count those as movies. Like I made seven either feature films or near feature films, and I count the ones. There's a couple shorter ones, like Dead Shit is like 40 minutes or 28 minutes or something like that. But it's got its own DVD release. It's got its own audio commentaries, behind the scenes features. So there's a few that fall a tad short of feature length, but they still have their own DVD releases with all that stuff. So I count them. So it's like five full blown feature length films, and then like two that fall shy of feature but got their own DVD releases.
nice. But so now you're distributed. Is that non-exclusively through Troma? Like I saw
Yeah,
that
that's a
you're now like your
non-exclusive deal.
whole shebang's on Troma now.
Yeah, all seven of those are on Troma now. It's a non-exclusive deal. I could publish through anyone else that I wanted to. If I was a more tech savvy fellow, I'd have them all on Tubi. But you have to present a subtitle track along with your feature soundtrack, and I don't know how to do that, so my movies aren't on Tubi. I just, in fact, I signed a subcontract with Troma where they said that they were going to shop out um, everyone that's got non-exclusives with Troma. They were going to start shopping them out and take a small cut to put them on
Other
stuff like
platforms.
Tubi, yeah, and as part of that non-exclusive deal. But I haven't seen my movies pop up anywhere else, and they probably won't. But it's Troma, and Troma moves very slowly. So maybe 3 or 4 years from now, my stuff, once Tubi's finally irrelevant or whatever, they'll pop up on there at the very. That's see, I've chased relevancy for my whole career, and it seems like I'm always just late to the party. With those shot on video movies that I made in the late 2000s, so the late aughts, like 2000, my first feature Dream Reaper was 2006. So 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 were the years that I was making films. That was just too late to be considered part of the shot on video revolution of the mid to late 90s. So and like there's like books that are all about underground shot on video movies, and my stuff never gets included because they think I made them too late. There's like a once you weren't shooting on mini DV or VHS-C tapes anymore. They don't count any of those digital, straight to tape or what do you call them? The capture cards. Once you were doing like
Yeah.
HD camcorders that were capture cards, they consider that like digital, and that's different from shot on video in their minds. I shot every single one of my movies on tape, on mini DV tapes, but
Yeah.
it was just too late for it to be counted in that era. And then right around that same era, 2005, 6 to 2008, 9, 10, that's when guys like James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd, became super famous doing YouTube videos. And
Yeah.
I was there at the beginning of YouTube. I put all my trailers and all my skits and everything on YouTube at the very beginning, but I just wasn't quite making the type of material that went viral at that time. And so while I was there with them, I watched them all rocket to success. And then I kind of, doing a feature length film that doesn't have anything to do with YouTube. You have to do, and like guys like the Smosh crew that were
Hmm.
doing like comedy skits. I wasn't doing like necessarily comedy skits. So I missed the shot on video train. I missed the YouTuber train. I just sort of seem to miss everything. I'm sort of in the peripheral of all of these like independent media revolutions, but I never count.
Yeah, you're like exactly the technological generation too late. So yeah, right when YouTube was taking off, that's whenever you're like having all these mini DV films. But I guess walk me through though, like what at the time, let's say 2010, how are you trying to? You're saying you're going to conventions.
Oh yeah.
How did you learn to even like do that, or like was that kind of your only form of revenue was physical DVD sales, or did you try to get a distributor? Like what paths did you take back then, and then what changed to like how you ended up with Troma now?
Well, at the time, I not only would I submit all my stuff to Troma every time. So every time I released one new, so you got Dream Reaper. Then my next film was Dead Shit, the zombie comedy with Nick that introduced Nixon and Hogan. So I sent Dream Reaper by itself to Troma for distribution. Got ignored. Dead Shit comes out. I put Dead Shit and Dream Reaper in the package and send it to Troma and get ignored. Then Colonel Kill Motherfuckers comes out, and I put all three in the packaging, on and so on and so on and so on, to the point that I would be at conventions. And I'll get to your other questions about how I learned about the convention thing in a second. But I would actually physically go up to Lloyd Kaufman and be like, Lloyd, what is the trouble? Like, I send you all my stuff. Like, this stuff is perfect for Troma, and
Yeah.
it gets ignored. And he would say to my face, like, "Oh, I'll put your shit out. Just send it to me. Just send it to me." I'm like, "I do. I send it to the acquisitions department. Can I send it to you personally?" No, 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 no. Just keep sending it. Just keep sending it. And I made friends with everybody that works the Troma tables out on the convention scene. So they would tell me like, we have new acquisitions people like every 6 months. It's a new kid that's just fresh out of, NYC film school that comes in to intern at Troma for 6 months. And they're the ones that are picking and choosing and tossing the ones they don't like out. They're like, just keep every 6 months, send us your movies and we'll, and we'll get there. And it never happened. It never happened with physical media. It wasn't until Troma Now, the streaming service, they basically have the attitude of we'll publish anything. So anybody that sends them anybody that sends them and now it's a digital link, of course. It's no longer you're no longer putting DVDs in the
Yeah.
mail and sending them off to a mailbox, but now you're just sort of contacting their acquisitions guy on Twitter, or I think Twitter is where I contacted the guy. And again, he doesn't work there anymore. The turnover at Troma, since they don't usually get paid anything, or if they do, it's very little. They kind of come out of film school, do a little bit of work at Troma, and then move on to commercials or move to LA and use that on the resume. So at the time, I contacted a guy at I think through Twitter who, it said he was the main acquisitions dude. And I think I may have even asked one of my contacts at Troma, like, who's doing acquisitions now? And they gave me his Twitter, and I DM'd him, and he told me, send me your links, and we'll see, we'll see what happens. And yeah, they accepted everything. And so that's how and that's a 15-year road. I started submitting from the very first feature I made. It took 15 years to get distributed by Troma, and it really is only because they're kind of in that they want Troma now to be they're building that catalog on Troma now, and they want everything. They want as much content as they can possibly put on there. They want on there, and I don't. It wasn't some awesome thing where Lloyd finally recognized my brilliance and took me under his wing as his protege, which was my dream as a teen and guy in my early 20s, and that literally never manifested. But in the end, through sheer tenacity, I eventually made it work and made it happen. And I think we were on. I don't think Trauma Now existed a year before I got on there, maybe 2 years.
I don't think I had even heard of it until I saw that you had gotten through their own platform or whatever.
So just as soon as that happened, I was like, I know they're gonna be trying to build out this thing as to have, because that's all the streaming services are trying to compete with each other for the amount of content they have, and that's so I was able to pull that off. They did not require a subtitle track to go with the feature track, so I wasn't hampered by
That's
technology.
not that hard though. Like those,
Well,
like you can
people
hire
tell me that
somebody for like it's literally like they pay by the
by
minute
the minute, right?
of time, and so you're just paying like $90 for someone to translate it, and it doesn't
Right.
have to be perfect.
It doesn't have to be anything.
Or you could do it yourself, and it just
Yeah.
sucks. Yeah, you kind of need software. I actually did do it line by line for myself with one of my movies, um, which I did it because I I don't want to get into that, but it was just like the person who I had do it like didn't actually speak English, and so like their like translations were not right.
Right.
Anyway,
Right.
but
But think about who you're talking to. I make Kevin Strange talkies. So if I
yeah.
sat down and tried to do line by line, it's going to take me so long. In fact, it would be funny to hire somebody to do a
Oh,
subtitle
I
for
want you to
hack
video
movies.
their face as they do it. Like are they how do they react to like all the footage that they get, and like they're used to doing 6 minute videos that are
Right.
like for YouTube content, and they're like, here's a feature film called Dead Shit. And it
Yeah.
involves about every taboo subject you can think of.
And they never stop talking. You're
Yeah, the
just like
whole time.
you start typing, you're like,
Yeah, they're like, I was used to whatever amount of words per minute. This is three
yeah,
times that.
yeah, 3 times that. They're taking breaks, drinking coffee, trying to keep up. Like, what the fuck? Yeah, that was my whole thing. Was I was inspired by Richard Linklater and Kevin Smith and Tarantino and all those guys. So I wrote as much dialogue as possible. I was. Are you familiar with Chris Seaver, Low Budget Pictures?
No.
He does a really micro budget trauma style stuff, but he inspired me because he was using handheld Walmart camcorders and Halloween masks that you can buy at Spirit Halloween or Walmart. Just the crappiest looking monsters and the crappiest looking cameras, and just shooting them in his house. There's no set decoration, there was no lighting, but that dude could just write the best dialogue, the weirdest non sequiturs and craziest shit. And it's one of those moments as an artist, as a creator, we always have that epiphany moment where you realize what your calling is. Like, oh, this is what I'm good at. Like this thing in the industry is what I'm a great editor. I'm a great writer. I'm a whatever. Like this is where my passion lies. And when I saw that type, and I was inspired by, like I said, Linklater and Kevin Smith and that. But when I saw Chris Seaver's dialogue, I was like, dialogue is free. It doesn't cost anything, and you can just fill your movie from the word go to the last credit with dialogue, and it doesn't cost anything extra, but it can make the movie. If you don't have the money for lights, you don't have the money for a camera, you don't have good editing software, but if you can write the shit out of some dialogue, there's still magic there. There's something weirdly punk rock about it, right? Like punk
Yeah.
rock musicians are shitty with their instruments, but when they get up there on stage and get angry and yell and everybody's you know moshing and punching each other in the crowd, it creates a particular type of energy. And I realized that you can create a particular type of art by with no budget whatsoever, $0 budget, if you have that gift of gab and you can just write your fucking balls off. And that's what I've been doing
You
for
know,
20 years.
I don't think I realized that watching your movies that really is like they're basically Tarantino Pulp Fiction, just two characters going at it saying the most insane stuff the entire time. Where it's
Well, Kevin Smith famously said his movies are two guys standing against the wall talking to each other. That's the movies I
Yeah.
made. They're on a couch smoking joints, and there might be a chick with her boobs out at some point. But yeah, there's very little to my movies, and maybe that's why they never got picked up for
But
proper
I, I,
distribution.
I, I mean, I always thought like if they weren't so extreme in their content, they were really good unto their own. Like it, not just locally. It was like, I mean, I'm biased because I like independent filmmaking was like the like just like you, I was inspired by Linklater and everybody else, the same stories that we all heard. And I say I didn't realize until I was out of high school, and then I started to meet people actually starting like trying to make independent films myself, and was like in local independent horror films and stuff like that. I didn't realize how small of a group we really were. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
realize like to me it was like everybody that was into movies loved anybody that made movies, whatever they were, as crazy as they were, as long as you weren't doing actually something illegal, or some. It's funny how like back in the day you ask like females to be in your movies and they're like, well, what kind of movie is it? I'm
is
like,
it
that's how
a
you
porno movie?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like,
Oh,
oh yeah, I should have
no.
told you up front. No, it's
Well,
like
that's
no.
the funny, again. That's also the funny thing about my movies. It's like, no, it's a movie called Cockhammer. It's about a snuff porn filmmaker
I'm
that says,
sorry, yeah.
"Oh, maybe it is porn. Maybe I'm
But
maybe I've
then
got some blinders on." No,
if
yeah,
you if actually I did want to get into Cockhammer. Like you did that was to me that was like the one that was kind of your biggest, I guess you could say most successful film. What all did you do with that one before Troma? What was kind of your main route with those films
that
that
one I did get distributed. Oh yeah, we never did go back and cover any of that stuff. The compound question never
we'll
got
get
finished.
there. I know I'm terrible at this. I'm a bad interviewer. I don't know
No,
why
no,
people
no.
like me.
I'm a ramble. You got me on here. This is a you get through other people interview me and they laugh that they have like a list of 15 questions. They'll get through about 3 in an hour because I
That's
just
the
keep talking,
norm.
keep talking. Yeah. But so Cockhammer was the first time I got actual distribution and I had been hunting everybody. Wild Eye Releasing, SRS Cinema. These are all Troma. These are all micro budget shot on video distributors that would possibly put your movie out. And at the time in the mid 2000s, if you got picked up by a Wild Eye or an SRS or Tempe or Troma or Full Moon to a much lesser degree. They didn't pick up Full Moon didn't pick up a lot of shot on video stuff, but that was your ticket to maybe getting on Netflix. And at the time, Netflix was a home delivery DVD company. They were a website. You signed up for their subscription model that was it was just like it is now, where they had a list of movies and you click on them. But instead of clicking on it and it playing the video like streaming like we have today, and you know this, I'm just telling this to the audience that may not know what it was back in the day. You could pick up to, I think it was up to 3 discs. You could pick up to 3 movies and they'd mail you the DVDs just in these paper sleeves, 3 paper sleeves. And what was revolutionary about it was Blockbuster was still charging late fees. If you kept the movie more than a day, they charge you like $3, and those late fees would rack up. People hated late fees, and Netflix said, "We're going to send you DVDs in the mail, and you keep them and for like $3 or something like that, or $5, and you keep them as long as you want, and send them back when you've watched them a million times. We don't care." And it got huge because people hated late fees and they loved everyone, and it was just sort of word of mouth. Everyone told their friends and family getting together at holidays, like, no, you don't understand, you can rent a movie from Netflix, they mail it to you and you can keep it. It doesn't matter, you don't have to send it back in a day or 2 days or 5 days. Like, they don't care when you send it back, but you can't get any more movies until you get 3 movies, you get 3 more when you send those 3 back. That's it. Super simple. Kind of weird now to even think that we used to mail DVDs back and forth to
Yeah,
a
it is
website.
weird.
Isn't that weird to even think about? But at the time, basically, if a distributor picked up your little crappy shot on video movie and Netflix wanted it, they would automatically start off by buying 100 copies of it, and so you would get paid for 100 sales right off the bat. That was
And
just
those
guaranteed.
sales were like way above retail. They'd be like $99 or something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. You're getting paid. You're getting paid good off of that. And so that was sort of what everyone was trying to do. And this goes right along with the rest of my just barely missing out on a media trend. It wasn't until 2009. It was we signed the contract in like mid 2009. Me and J.R. Bookwalter at Tempe Entertainment, we signed a sub distribution contract, which meant that I had to pay for the glass mastering of the DVDs, but then he would sell them. I would basically have them manufactured and drop shipped to his office, and then he would assemble the DVDs and sell them through Amazon, through Netflix, and through the other distribution channels he had. And so the idea was, what he would tell everybody was, if we can get on Netflix, it'll pay for all that glass mastered, because we had to print a minimum of 1,000 copies. And uh, and he would say like that'll all get paid for with the Netflix deal, and then you can make money with the rest of my distribution channels. But so in other words, he wouldn't take the risk to actually manufacture your product. You had to take the upfront risk, but then you would get the kickback when he sold to Netflix.
Yeah.
The quarter that Cockhammer was set to be sent to Cockhammer and like four other titles were set to be sent to Netflix for that quarter. Netflix emailed J.R. Bookwalter and told him, we're no longer interested in carrying any of your DVD product. We're switching to a streaming only uh, distribution system with our distributor partners, and we're not interested in any of these four titles. So Jr. emailed me and was like, "I'm out. I think I'm out of it. Not only did you get fucked accidentally, but I think I might be out of business because
Oh,
I don't know if Netflix is ever going to carry another one. And this is like my model. This is my
yeah.
business model. And they just told me they don't want any of these movies. And Tempe went on for another few years, and most of those other companies are still in business too. So they all sort of adapted to that and figured out ways to. And I don't understand like what's the difference. They carried everything physical media, and then they decided when they went to streaming that they didn't want to carry those titles anymore. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why not carry it? Because streaming is only, I guess it's a maybe bandwidth costs them more than the mail order system did, but the mail order system required them to have not only a warehouse to house all those millions of DVDs, but they had this. I don't know if you've ever seen like the behind the scenes of Netflix and how that whole the Netflix versus Blockbuster and how Netflix put Blockbuster out of business. But they had this sorting system. They built their own technology where they would dump the DVDs into this like saucer thing that would sort the DVDs down into back into their categories where they
Whoa.
could
No,
go
I
back.
know nothing about that, but that's really
Block,
interesting.
Blockbuster Video would send spies into the warehouses to try to figure out that technology. Like we're paying people to sit there by hand and separate every one of these DVDs we get in the mail back out into their categories so we can send them to the next customer. And I have to imagine that system and those warehouses cost more than the bandwidth to stream movies. But maybe I don't know. I can't speak for Netflix on why they decided to do what they did, but that was another instance where I was about to
Literally
Cockhammer
the quarter of.
was about to take off and be a Netflix hit, and nope, I was denied by that exact quarter.
Oh man, that is like hilarious yet heart crushing. But
So
so
Jr. was a fan, and he liked my stuff, and he loved. Jr's a shot on video. He's a pioneer with his movie The Dead Next Door. It was a late '80s shot on VHS movie. And he said, "I'll keep doing deals with you if you want." I was like, "I can't fucking afford to Glassmaster
a
these
thousand every yeah. Well,
every
is
single
there any
time."
other way that like I mean, nowadays there's even the people that get on streaming platforms, they're like, I make more through physical sales. And just like with
Yeah,
comics, going to conventions and like if you can
yeah,
sell, I don't know, 20 DVDs for $10, and you do 12 conventions a year or something like that, or you try to get it into subscription boxes, or like there's different avenues. Are there any others
yeah.
that have worked for
Well,
you or that you know?
when I was doing conventions, and I was hardcore convention guy. That's where I made the 90% of my sales. And I had my website set up, and you could buy stuff through PayPal, and you could buy my stuff, and I would do pre-orders that way. And I had a very large MySpace social media presence. I had about 50,000 MySpace followers. This was
You were be like, it's just
yeah,
funny that like your success on one thing was the thing that died.
yeah. That's the story of my career, brother. That's
Oh,
just how it goes. That was like 2004. We had like 2004 into 2005. We had like 50,000 MySpace followers.
that's whenever I think like first knew of you because I was like in high school in 2004, 2005.
Yeah,
And so like anybody in the local independent film scene, it was like, well, who's doing anything cool? And it's like, well, this guy
yeah,
is. And you had your own website back then. And even
yeah.
and at that
Yeah,
time it was like, whoa, he's got his own
yeah.
website. He's like doing big things.
Yeah, well, not only well because that we had halfmovies.com before YouTube existed.
Yeah, I
So
remember that. Yeah.
what you would have to do is you would click on trailers, and it would say, "Here's a link to Windows Media Player. Right click and download Windows Media Player so that you can play my trailer. Then right click and download the MP4 trailer to then play on your player on your
Ah,
computer." And thousands of people did. There was no other way to do it.
yeah.
You know, back then people just sort of accepted the technology as it was, and then as YouTube developed, we obviously changed it to having embedded YouTube videos for the trailers and things like that. But yeah, you could buy the DVDs from me, so it was direct to consumer purchases through my website, and then conventions to this day. Like I had taken the movies kind of out of rotation for several years because I was focusing on my career as a novelist, and then as a cartoonist making comic books. And then all of a sudden one day I just was like, "Fuck it, I'm going to put the movies back out." And I went through Kunaki and mastered every all of the movies through Kunaki and got them because those are DVD-R through, and this is all industry like how the sausage works. I don't know. I'm guessing though you have a lot of filmmakers in your audience that find these types of things interesting.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I do.
instead of having to glass master them and do 1,000 of them through Kunaki, you can literally it's print on demand. You can do one at a time if you want, and but they're DVD-Rs. But they get that you can put a UPC code. Is that what they're called? UPC? Because now it's all QR.
Yeah, I
It's all
actually don't
QR.
remember.
UPC, I think, is what they call that, like a retail that you can a retail scan
Yeah,
label,
I know what you're
and,
talking about. I think
and
most people
they
would.
yeah, and they shrink wrap it so they make it look all professional. But you can buy one or you can buy 10,000. Like it's print on demand. And so I brought the movies back out into circulation and went on a convention tour with. I have never stopped doing conventions. I've pretty much been on the road at least a little bit every year for almost 20 years. Well, 2026 will be 20 years since 2006 was my first year doing conventions
That's
with the
dang, it's
movie.
crazy that that's been 20,
So
almost 20
yeah,
years.
it's been 18 years that I've basically been on the road selling all over the country. But a few years ago, when we re-released the movies, uh, I had to after our we sold out of probably had 50 or 80 DVDs at our first convention down in Kansas City at a convention called Crypticon. Is it Crypticon? Yeah, Crypticon,
Oh,
Kansas
like
City.
cryptids?
Yeah, like cryptids. Crypticon, Kansas City. We sold like I don't know 50 or 60 or something. And so I ordered, and we had a big convention tour that we had already booked. We had already bought the tables out for like 6 months, and we sold out on like Friday, and we still had Saturday and Sunday. We had books and comics that we could sell, but we blew through the DVDs. They were so enthusiastic about the DVDs, and this is like 2018. This is like post, DVD. Like everybody wants Blu-rays or streaming by
Huh.
2018, and so I ordered a batch of 600 for that convention season for the remainder of the maybe 5-6 shows we had left that season, and had to reorder another 600 before the season was over to have the stock ready for the next season. and we definitely burned through in from 2018, 2019 till COVID shut everything down. We sold over 2,000 DVDs on the road, and
Nice.
that's not including novels and comics. That's just the Hack Movies DVDs, and that's over a decade after they came out.
What
We
were
wanted
so these people did they were most of the buyers people that knew hack movies, or were they
never
just
heard,
intrigued by
never heard.
independent films?
Love the titles, love my pitch, loved the idea of the DIY shot on video stuff, because I made a big banner that said shot on video horror. I was like leaning into the to that era of, even though I don't count because I made them too late, I was leaning into that era of shot on video movies, and there's some sort of nostalgia for that.
That
So
yeah.
the way I kind of frame it is, when I was making shot on video movies in the mid 2000s, the hip trendy way to make independent movies was to shoot on super 8 or 16 millimeter, but mostly super 8 was like the cheaper way to do it. 16 millimeter was still a little bit too expensive. Maybe super 16 and super 8 were like the like art house way to make movies in the mid
Yeah.
2000s. And so me shooting on video, I was an asshole. Well, now a decade removed from that, or a decade and a half removed from that, there's a nostalgia now for, so everybody's shooting on their phones. Everybody shoots their movies on their phones, and now there's a nostalgia for, you're an asshole if you shoot an indie movie on your phone. Now the nostalgia is, let's go find an old VHS camera and do shot on video movies, and that's the new art house style, is to shoot shot on video stuff. There's like this whole wave of younger audience at horror conventions that just see shot on video. And I transferred everything to VHS. So I've got VHS you can buy and DVDs. And a lot of the younger guys, like the 16, 17, 18-year-old dudes that are just getting into horror and want to be filmmakers, they gravitate right to the VHS. They want to collect
Yeah.
the Hack Movies VHS stuff, which I'd never, I didn't even realize was a possibility. And when I figured out that I could set up some VCRs and a DVD player and literally rip a DVD to a VHS tape, I was like, man, this is awesome, because I grew up in the VHS era,
No,
way
yeah.
before DVD ever existed. So it hits me in the nostalgia feels just to have all my movies on VHS. And when you watch them on VHS, if you like, I think that's the preferred method to watch the Hack Movies, to watch anything shot on video, is to watch that shit on VHS, because it has a much different quality than when you watch it as a pristine, HD 4K up converted, video file.
Yeah, your movies, I feel like they were made for VHS and not to be
Right,
like high definition. That
right,
I
right.
remember
Retro.
in whenever I whenever you first started doing the books, and I remember I was with our mutual friend Josh Thornton, and he was saying kind of something about like, I was like, is he still making movies? And he was like, no, I don't think so. And I was like, man, because I was right whenever I started doing comics kind of for real. And I was like, his stuff would fall right in line. Like I didn't realize you were already doing conventions and stuff, but I was like, there is an entire market for like his movies would be collectibles. Like he could put them as VHSs, he could sell them with, posters and DVDs and like that niche. What do you call that subgenre of horror that you do? I know with the books you call it bizarro fiction, but what do you
Yeah.
call it for movies?
What we would just call it no budget horror comedy. We would just call them horror comedy movies. There really wasn't, or extreme horror. Um,
Because
there wasn't really there wasn't really a good marketing term for it.
it's yeah, that's the thing is people that are going after like ultra gore, you're not that. I mean, there is gore, but and people that are going for like vulgar, it's not really to such extremes to where it's actually like whenever people are trying to look up like the most disturbing movies or something like that, that's not the category you're in. You're like
Right.
somewhere in this weird, like somehow it's sort of like comfortable, uncomfortable,
Good, good
extreme
bad taste.
comedy.
Good bad taste is how John Waters described it, and I definitely fall in that, like,
Oh,
between
yes,
somewhere,
that's it. It
yeah,
sort of falls
somewhere
into the
between,
John Waters category. Good,
somewhere
bad
between
taste.
Troma and John Waters. It's this sort of like, it's meant to poke fun at people, but it's not done in a cruel or harmful manner. There's another local guy. His name's Eric Stanzi that has Wicked Pixel Productions, and he does movies like Scrapbook and Ice from the Sun, and his
I've
movies are
seen
very
that.
cool.
I didn't know that guy was local.
Yeah, he's local. He's St. Louis guy. They're very cruel. They're like torture porn style stuff, and that's what you would say like the extra. I want to see the most extreme. He falls into that extreme horror category. You're
Yeah.
right. I don't. My stuff is so goofy and
His aren't,
cartoony.
I'm not saying they're, those are less entertaining to me,
Oh,
like yours are actually because they're Tarantino-esque in their nonstop talking and like them talking is the most entertaining part. Yeah, yours falls into definitely a I don't, yeah, that's interesting that I never thought of it as like John Waters meets Troma, but now I realize like that is exactly what it is. Um, all right, so now let's get to the novels and comics and kind of how like let's get into the grit. Like how do you publish your books? Like let's start with the novels first and then we'll end on the comics. Like what do you actually do into like publish them? How are you selling them aside from your convention stuff and all that, whatever you want to get into.
Well, that was a whole nother career. When I shifted focus from making movies to becoming a novelist, I started off as a small press publisher where I published my own works, but I also published a ton of other authors through anthologies and then by also acquiring and distributing other people's novels, mostly brand new. I looked for new talent that had never been published before, and I would first put them. I treated my publishing house similar to like a DIY punk rock record label where I would find new blood and then I would publish them for the first time in an anthology or two. Maybe I would do two anthologies with them and then release their solo work. So you would first read them in my Strange House Books anthologies, and then you would see that I had another, a full length available from them, and maybe several full lengths available from them. And I did the same with my work. I would put my work in the anthologies, and then I would release full length novels. And I did all that just to sort of put a bow on the filmmaking thing. Was exactly the reason that I told you I was just so frustrated that I was sort of late to every party that eventually, and making a movie for $0 costs so much money.
Yeah.
And how it costs money is it takes time away from being able to focus on like a really like a responsibility heavy full-time job and things like that, and it takes time away from relationships, friendships, and family, and it's a toil. You're just it's so much labor, and after doing so many of them, and I had many more. I obviously I'm a prolific creator, and I could have continued making movies forever if I would have just gotten a break around that time period. I would have never stopped.
Yeah.
But I just had enough. I just needed a break. I didn't know how long that break was going to be, but and I stopped doing anything at all. I went back to college. I was going to be an EMT. I was taking EMT courses, and I couldn't. The longer I stayed away from telling stories in movies, the crazier I was getting. Like I needed to. The stories were building up in my brain, and I just couldn't handle not being a storyteller. And I thought, well, around that time I bought Stephen King's book on writing. That's sort of his little. It's a very short book, very concise book,
Yeah.
but it just talks about if you want to be a writer, here's some things you could consider. And I just kept thinking, could I do that? Could I write fiction? Because it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't take time away from a regular job. I could still spend time in relationships and with friends and family. And then you just sort of write on the side. You just sort of write when you can. And me being me, that was the idea. And then suddenly it was a full blown, no, fuck this. I'm going to do this as a full time thing, and I'm going to be a publisher and this and that. And we that time with the novels, I actually hit at the apex. Bizarro fiction was just building, and I had no idea that it existed. I was like, is there anything the equivalent of like a Troma movie in prose form? I've never read a book that reads like a Troma movie. And I started doing research, and I found this author named Carlton Mellick the third, and he wrote books like The Baby Jesus Butt Plug and Razor Wire Pubic Hair and The Haunted Vagina, and just crazy titles. And he had written like 30 books, and they were all on Amazon, and they all looked like they were selling really well. Like they had a ton of ratings and really high reviews from people like me saying I was looking for some extreme exploitation, Troma-esque style novels, and I found it with this guy. And so he had his own publishing house, and he published his own people up out of Portland. Long story short, I decided I was going to be the St. Louis hub of that. And I was going to get together my friends in the St. Louis area and then find people from out of town, whatever, and start publishing. And I sorted through my research. I found that they were exclusively doing business through Amazon and conventions. That was it. It's all you needed. All you needed was to put your stuff on. And at the time, Amazon Kindle wasn't even huge, but I embraced it. I put every single release we put out through Amazon paperback, because they do a print on demand, like Kunaki we were talking about with the DVDs.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon has its own. It used to be called Create Space, was the name of the company, but it got bought out by Amazon. Now it's just Amazon that does the print on demand. So you format your manuscript in a Word file, and you get your cover art. And I had been doing that with DVD art, so that was no sweat. I knew my way, around Photoshop enough to buy art from an artist and then compile a book art. And so you upload the Word file, upload the book art, and bam, bam, you've got a box full of novels coming to you and into your house. And then I was a convention fiend. I had already been on the convention circuit for 7 or 8 years. So I just took our shit on the road, did another road show. But at that time, I took all the movies out of print and focused just on being a novelist and a publisher. And I did that. And it was right at the time when when people were starting to learn about this Bizarro company. So at our peak, we were doing between convention sales, online sales, and then what Amazon called like they would do. You could do like 4 days per month. You could take your Kindle book, and you could price it free. So whatever you were selling it for, $9.99, $6.99, $2.99 was our like sweet spot. We would sell our Kindle books for $2.99. You could reduce that to free and do it as a promotion. And so you had four free promotions per book per month. And we were so hooked into that Amazon algorithm, social media, and conventions and everything. We did 48,000 units in our biggest year. And now 90% of that was the free Kindle downloads. But it's even like today, it's hard to even get 10 people to download
Yeah, no,
your
that's
free book. So
I know what numbers
48,000.
look like in books, and those are big numbers.
Yeah, we did, and that was 2012. So 2012, we did 48,000 between all of the different areas of sales and free giveaways. And there's a social media site called Goodreads that's like the social media of it's like the Facebook of book readers. And so you as the author upload your book, and then fans can rate it, give it a star rating, and then also give it reviews. And Goodreads does physical giveaways. So we would set up giveaways through Goodreads where we would do like 15 giveaways, and then people would enter into it, and then Goodreads would they would do a randomized. They had like a random generator thing where they would give you the whatever 15 names out of 1,000 people that signed up for the freebie, and then you would have to mail those out to the winners. And we did that every month. We would do Goodreads giveaways too. So we were I was real hooked into the technology. I understood the technology. I was in the algorithm. I had a pretty good run as a novelist, and I wrote 18 books from my first book was like 2011, and my last book was like 2017. I did 18 books, me personally.
Yeah, that's impressive. I think
Well, it's just
I read one of them where it like the plot was a character has to go to a cabin and write a book. Did you write a book that had that plot, or am I imagining something?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I
Well,
swear, like there was I thought like that was like the opening was like anyway. I maybe
yeah.
remember
Well,
wrong.
yeah, no, maybe that's the opening of I Died in a Bed of Roses.
I
He's
think
out
it
there
is.
doing
Yeah,
something. Is he writing a novel? Because he had
yeah.
been like shunned from the convention culture, and then he's
Yeah,
gonna
it
he's
was to me
gotta
it was
fall
like
into
yeah, like an exaggerated
Yeah,
story
version.
about you or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
That was I Died in a Bed of Roses. Yeah, and I actually wrote that in Portland with Carlton Mellick. So the guy I found on the internet, we ended up becoming friends, and he ended up becoming a really powerful mentor to me. And I was able to convince him to let me go do a writing marathon with him. And Carlton famously can hole himself up in a room and write an entire book without coming out. And sometimes it takes a weekend, sometimes it takes 2 weeks. He said the longest was 6 weeks, where he worked continuously until the book was done. And
oh.
we took on the task of writing short books in a week. And I finished I Died in a Bed of Roses in 4 days. It's a 35,000 word manuscript, which
I was
is
gonna say, I was like, it's not that short. It's
yeah,
still a
it's a
typical
chunky
novel.
chunky novella size. 65,000 is what publishers like as a novel. That's going to be like 300,
Yeah.
320 pages. So I Died in a Bed of Roses is about 200, 210 pages, something like that. So it's like a chunky novella or a really short novel, but I wrote it in 4 days. And Carlton wrote his book in 5 days. So I actually beat the guy that does marathon writing. I beat him. And when we finished, we talked about books and we talked about writing and everything all week long, but he didn't disclose till we were done. He said, I didn't want to say this because I didn't want to discourage you, but no one I've ever brought on a writing retreat has finished a book before. You're the first guy that's come out here with me actually, and I've done it. I was like, well, that's good. And I had been practicing. I had been renting hotel rooms. I would drive to like Springfield, Illinois, so it was just far enough away that I couldn't just get bored and go home. And I would hole up in the hotel room and I would speed write like a 15,000 or 18,000 word manuscript, or something I could do in 2 or 3 days, and then drive home with it. My book, Computer Face, was written that way, and several other books were written that way. McHumans was written that way. McHumans just went viral on TikTok. Some Spanish kid did a review of it, and it got 750,000 views. And so
Nice.
I've still got I never took the novels out of print, so they're still all on Amazon. And so I got a big boost in sales for just of that book from that guy doing a TikTok review of it. So this, it
I
just
was gonna
keeps
say, like,
rolling.
you have a very unique to yourself, like, array of IP. I feel like eventually it's all
Yeah.
gonna pinnacle to where it's like you've definitely found the success in this one avenue. I think it'll all come together, especially since you already have your still. So, do you still run Strange House, the publishing company? Do you still do
No,
that?
so I ended up selling that off to focus just on writing, because dealing with the egos of other authors and things like that really started to get to me, and then everything kind of got clicky around 2014. Everybody on social media started to split into like political camps, and it started tearing apart these communities that had been built on social media. And the Bizarro fiction community was one of the first. So it was one of the first and hardest hit of those communities, and it tore itself in half. And there is no longer a Bizarro fiction community to this day of any note, because the politics tore it in half. And around the time that started to really get intense, I said, I don't want any part of this publishing people anymore, because people are being weird. They're like coming to you to try to get a publishing deal only so they can then go tell other people what your publishing contract looks like, to shame you, publicly shame you for not
Oh,
giving
goodness.
the deals they like. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We won't even get into it. But I walked away from it. I sold my publishing house to focus just on writing fiction myself. And around that time, to parlay that into comics, my one of my best friends and the guy that was the cinematographer on all my movies, Nick Brian Walters is full name. He was such an instrumental part of the later Hack movies. Cockhammer and Nixon and Hogan Smoke Christmas and Nixon and Hogan Meet Satan wouldn't be anything like they are without his hand all over that stuff. They were his cameras, or if I bought the camera, I bought it because he told me that was a good camera to buy. The editing stuff, he was very intense about how to export videos, to get encode them to get the highest quality out of them, compressed just right to get them to fit on a DVD at the highest quality we could get them. He was the tech dude, just to be concise. He was the tech guy, and he was also the cinematographer. And we were talking about this was, as the Bizarro fiction community crumbled, we were talking about, should we get the band back together? Should we make another movie? Wouldn't that be crazy? We were talking on the phone. We'd sit for hours and talk on the phone and start. We were really, we weren't 100% committed to it, but we were really talking about getting back and making another film. This was around 2017, and then he tragically died. He had
Oh,
some sudden organ failure and died in a 48-hour period. Went from being kind of uncomfortable to dead. Uncomfortable enough he needed to check himself into the ER and see what was wrong with him, and then dead. And that affected me so deeply. I thought I could never make a movie without Nick, and I didn't know what to do. Like I didn't want to keep writing books because the writing community was in shambles, and I didn't want to make a movie without Nick. And so I started. One of the things I wanted to do when I and you'll appreciate this, when I first transitioned from film to novels, one of the first things I explored was graphic novels. Well, I'll write the scripts to a graphic novel, and I'll have an artist. I'll pay the artist to draw these things, and because again, I didn't have confidence that there was a Troma-esque like novels out there that we could actually sell them as books, but maybe we can sell them as graphic novels. Maybe we can do some outrageous, crazy Troma-esque horror comedy graphic novels. And the quotes I got were very reasonable. But I was talking about writing a 150, 165 page graphic novel. And the quotes I was getting was, if you want me to do the pencils, the inks, the lettering, and the color, it's going to cost you about $150 a page. And I was like, wait. I can make a feature length film like Cockhammer for $500, but you're telling me it's going to be $20,000 to draw a graphic novel for me? And so so the idea of doing comics came and went real quick when I saw what the artists were charging, and that's not unreasonable.
no, yeah.
They were telling me $40 for pencils, $40 for inks, another 20 for lettering, and 50 for fully coloring. Those aren't bad numbers. 150 a page is not. Those are not to this day. Those aren't bad numbers.
No,
You
yeah.
know, that's pretty much what you're looking at. Maybe a little bit more these days, but that's pretty much what you've been looking at for a decade or more to pay the artist. And so instead of why I didn't say, okay, well then I'll do a 20-page book. I don't know why I was just like, oh, fuck that. I'm going to write novels. But then I came back around to it again and was like, all right, I'm going to check it out again because I don't want to do movies and I don't want to write books anymore, but maybe I can pay an artist to do a small book. And the prices were about the same. And so I even went to Fiverr and was trying to find the cheap foreign Fiverr artists to work on the stuff. And if they were cheap, their styles were not good, very amateurish. And if they were really good, the prices were too high. I was just stuck. And um, at the time, I was watching. At the time, it started to become popular for artists to crowdfund their comic books, indie comic artists, and then draw the comic on YouTube on live streams. And so I started watching people use the big Cintiq digital comics. I started watching, and there was a program they were using called Clip Studio, and it
Hmm.
was basically a Japanese mirror of Photoshop that had more tools that were uh, geared towards artists and it's comics and manga specifically. So I started watching these guys work. I'm like, I know Photoshop backwards and forwards. And when I was in high school, like I wanted to be a comic book artist long before I wanted to be a filmmaker. And so I was like, you know what? I could draw this shit myself. Like it ain't gonna be pretty at first, but neither were my movies. Like I know, like, and neither were my novels. Like I've always taken the approach of failing publicly, and you can watch my growth. I let people watch my growth publicly. Some creators are terrified of showing their old stuff, their original stuff or whatever, and they want to be polished before they go out into the public so they're not embarrassed.
Yeah.
um, I love the idea of people being able to grow with me as the audience, being able to see me as a filmmaker grow, as a novelist grow. And I was like, well, I guess I guess I'm going back to ground zero, starting over in a whole nother medium. And so I drew Dead Shit uh, as a graphic novel, and it was a, because I did Dead Shit the movie, so it was the graphic novel, it was the comic book it was the reverse of what you do. You take a comic book and then you create it into you take that IP and you blow it up into a film. Well, I did the opposite. I took the film and blew it up into a graphic novel, and I greatly expanded on the storyline. And Nick, my cinematographer that passed away, he had played the villain Don Duepe in Dead Shit. So I expanded his role and really kind of made him an anti-hero. And I dedicated the whole book to Nick and basically made it my, you know, like I can't make movies anymore, but I can make comic book versions of my movies with sort of the spirit of Nick infused into it. So he's still here with me, and he's still going on this journey. Even though I can't make movies with him anymore, I can make comic books that feature him and that are dedicated to him, and sort of wrap him into them. And so I've just been, now it's crazy that it's been 2018 was my first, was when I did Dead Shit, the graphic novel. So 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So I'm 6 years into a comic book career now, and I've gotten somewhat better. I'm not great. I'm not a great cartoonist by any matter of means, but I think that my style suits the subject matter and the tone.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure. I mean, whenever I first saw him, I was like, it's almost like your stuff was meant to ultimately cultivate, like come into your comic books, because you take these stories that were very dialogue heavy, but because they're now in the comic form, you could expand into more of like the monsters and stuff. And your style is good. I mean, uh for what it is, it's actually really good. It like perfectly matches, I feel like, your whole aesthetic, I guess, so to speak. And
I appreciate that. Coming from you, that means a lot because you're a comic book guy. You're a comic book professional these days, so
well,
that
and but
means a lot coming from you.
if I could show, dang it, I have your books here somewhere, but I would like show, like, there's nothing about it that someone would look at your artwork and think amateur. What they would think is very highly stylized to you, which is
Cartoon.
exactly
Yeah.
what I always preach to people, is like that's what you need. Like your style, both like your voice as an author, as a creator, and then also as an artist, they all come together perfectly in your books. And it's like with yours, I feel like they would. It's like you have your, like, the audience is out there, and as soon as you would be, you're at the top of your game of your niche, is what I feel. And it's like as
Thank you.
soon as people in your niche even start to latch on more, like you'll continue to be one of the best in your field, because everything you've done in your genre, like, is not only like right on par with everything else, it's better than some of the other stuff, you know. Um, it's just that yours is not a mainstream niche, you know. It's
And I've got ideas of, because I didn't really know what I was going to be able to do with the comics, because they tend to lead toward they tend to lean toward the adult side, and comic book shops. You know more about what comic book shops
yeah, they won't
accepted,
take that.
but I don't think most of them will. There are comic book shops that like that. The owners are old enough to remember the old undergrounds from the '60s, where they did have pornographic content and hardcore drug use and violence and things like that in them, and they were in the cartoony style, the Robert Crumbs and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
S.K. Wilkins and those types of guys. Um, and so they will accept that kind of stuff as like, oh yeah, I remember this. But younger comic book owners, they don't want to mess with it. And there's a precedent for it. We don't have to get into it, but in the '90s, there were some comic books that led to some comic book store owners going to prison for selling obscenity, and so that kind of cooled off the industry, comic book shops, from carrying adult content. It's been many years, and those laws have all pretty much gone away. So it's just sort of, it's continuing because that's how these guys grew up and learned how to run shops. But they're not going to get in the kind of trouble for selling adult content today that people used to get into trouble in the '90s. And it was really like the '70s and then the '90s. The '80s, nobody cared. They had weird laws in the '70s to go after, because the undergrounds were sold in head shops. There was no such thing as a comic book shop in the late '60s, early 1970s. You bought superhero comics from the newsstand, and you
Yeah.
bought underground comics from the head shop. And then they changed the laws to so that cops could go in and bust the clerks and owners of head shops for carrying the comic books. So the head
Oh,
shop, so the head shops killed comics. Then comic book stores exist, and then you get underground comics like Boneyard Press. My friend Hart Fisher in the '90s, he published books like he published the Jeffrey Dahmer comics that got him in super hot water, and he got dragged onto like Donahue and those daytime talk shows by the Jeffrey Dahmer's victims' families, telling him that he was
oh
like
no.
exploiting the victims, which he wasn't. You know, his defense was Jeffrey Dahmer's the bad guy. Like
Yeah.
we're this is a warning. Like we're exposing a serial killer. Like you, we can't just not talk about him. Everyone in the country knows who he is. We're exposing him for being evil, and they didn't like that. But that was the time. And so in the '90s, laws changed again, and obscenity. You know, it was the Satanic Panic, and obscenity laws got changed again, and now comic book shop owners were being busted for carrying Boneyard Press and Boneyard Press stuff, and Glenn Danzig from the Misfits and Danzig, obviously. Mother, tell your children not to. That guy.
Uh-huh.
He's a huge comic book guy, and he had a comic book line called Verotica, and it was super hardcore, super tons of sex and violence and nudity, pornographic content, and that got one of his issues of Erotica got a couple of booksellers thrown in jail, and that put it on. That was the cooling effect on the whole industry, and the whole industry stopped carrying adult works. None of those laws exist anymore. If the shops really wanted to carry adult stuff, they could, but they're more geared towards Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, much younger skewing
Yeah.
audience, hanging around the stores. And I understand they don't want adult content, and I'm
Well,
not
like
pushing
you,
that.
like the big example is Ed Pisker's Red Room. Do you know that
Yes.
one, or have you read that one? Like that,
Yeah.
people read that stuff. That's in comic shops.
Well,
So
and that's new. That's new within the
it's
last
new.
2 years. And he was basically like, "I'm going to try to do this, and they might not take my stuff." And the industry, like I said, the industry, well, okay, we'll try with Red Room and see what happens. You know what happened? Nothing.
Yeah.
So
It's one of
there
the
is,
most popular. I mean, that's one
yeah.
of the most,
Not only that, it's one of the most popular
yeah.
indie comics going right now. I think he mentioned numbers like 100,000.
Yeah. And I think his second one did even more.
Yeah. So I think the door's opening for that, but I'm not trying to put my stuff in the comic book shops as much as I would like to. And there's a few titles that I'm going to experiment with doing that. But one thing that's happening now all over the country, in Missouri and Illinois are two states that have done this. They've legalized marijuana to the point that there are head shops and dispensaries where you can buy marijuana legally popping up
Oh my goodness, that's genius.
everywhere.
You can
And
get them in
so
there.
and I can get them in there, and I already have. I've been taking the black and white free giveaway copies, and there's 10 shops in our little local hometown area between Edwardsville, Alton, East Alton, Wood River. Um, there's 10 head shops or dispensaries, and they've all told me that I could put my stuff on the counter to give away. The next step is to go back in there and try to get them to buy copies to sell.
Yeah, on consignment or whatever. Dang,
Yeah,
yeah. I feel like I said, you're culminating to a pinnacle that I feel like you're about to like whatever you call that, you're about to cross the chasm because yeah, in this merging world to where this kind of content is the new, it's almost like you said, punk rock and almost rebellious just in its nature. And that's becoming the world that we're living in. We're split apart, but eventually we're gonna come together with these extremes.
What's weird is like it started with the internet, and now I'm going back to the mom and pop shops. And the
Yeah.
internet's doing really good. Like have you heard of Comic Fury? Do you know that as a webtoon website? It's not like it's like webtoons or Tapas or those other ones. It's called
Yeah,
Comic
I don't know
Fury.
why I don't know that one. Comic Fury?
Comic Fury, yeah. And so I've started doing I do what's called the Strangeville Comics Archive. And what that is I take random issues from the back catalog because like I said, I've been doing comics for 6 years now. I've got multiple graphic novels and multiple one shots. I've got hundreds and hundreds. I've got about 600 pages of published comics right now. And so what
Whoa.
I did was I just started Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I upload one page of a particular issue, and I publish them Monday, Wednesday, Friday for months on end until that issue ends, and then I pick another random issue. And so you're never going to get a whole graphic novel for free all at once, but you'll
Yeah.
get one section of it, and then maybe a one shot, and then an exclusive that's only published on our Comic Fury page, and then back to another issue of a back issue. And I've got over 200 pages published now for free on my Comic Fury page. With we've had 15,000 unique visitors, over 40,000 page views in a year. So
Nice job.
not super bad. It can get. I mean, I follow some comic guys on there that have 750,000 views, so I know a million is achievable.
Yeah.
Like the viewer base on Comic Fury tops out at over a million, so there's plenty of upward mobility for my webcomic too. And the way
Well,
and
do you
go ahead.
are you allowed to put yours on Tapas and Webtoon, or do you just not want to do that? Why
I
don't you
don't
put them on
think
all the
so.
platforms?
I don't think so. A lot of them, like Webtoon and Tapas, I think they have a nudity and pornography
Oh yeah,
ban.
you're right. They do. They actually they made me censor my comics. I forgot that. Yeah, yours would be you'd have to heavily censor it, which would sort of ruin it.
Yeah, comic. I was so delighted to see Comic Fury has no censorship policy. It's awesome. I put everything on there uncensored. They don't give a shit. Great.
That for some reason reminded me of. Did you watch the HBO show about the porn industry in the 60s and 70s with James Franco? Do you know
Oh
what I'm
yeah,
talking about?
yeah, yeah. It was called. What was it called?
Yeah, why
Is it,
can't I think of it? What was it called? Anyway, there was a line in that where he's
name
like,
of the corner of the street where his bar is a
"Yeah, the deuce."
the Deuce. Yeah,
And it was but there's a line in that where he's like, apparently New York has no morals or whatever. And it just made me think of like, oh yeah, you remember that that website that yeah, apparently they have no morals. They let
yeah.
anything on there now.
Comic Fury, no morals. They let Kevin
Um
Strange on there.
man, so we've crossed over an hour. I feel like we could still talk for another hour. So we're definitely have to get up in person. But before we go, what's live now on Kickstarter? Where can I send people? What's your main website? What's your link tree or whatever? I'll put it all in the description, but what's your
Yeah,
main hub right now that if I funnel everybody there,
the
that it'll
link tree
actually
the link tree is the best place to go because it's got our current Indiegogo crowdfunder for a book called Death to Strangeville, which is like a meta story of me as a cartoon Strange, defending the town of Strangeville against satanic ant demons. And then I kind of give a history of Strangeville along the way. Like I talk about the movies and I talk about the novels and things and all the convention touring and all that. And in comic book form, I kind of show you the journey. Death to Strangeville is kind of like a primer, like if you just want to get into, if you don't know anything about, because it's such a big, it's 7 films and 18 novels and another dozen, like where do I even begin? Well, I think Death to Strangeville, which is the print version is funding now on Indiegogo, is a great place to sort of learn the basics of what Strangeville is. And then you can sort of decide whether you want to go the movie route, the novel route, or the comic route from there. And that's funding now on Indiegogo. I don't know when you're going to put this up, but through the end of March, it'll be like, I think March 29th is the last day to back the book. And you get the book, you can get the PDF version of the book for $3. And it's 20 pages full color. And it's like black light color. It's like a really cool, trippy psychedelic color too. You can get the PDF for $3. You can get the floppy print comic for $8, or you can get the 11 by 17 poster of the cover art and the book, the floppy for $12. And then there's add-ons that you can pick up all the stuff, all the comics and graphic novels that I've done before this that are still in print. Some of them are out of print because like the graphic novels are expensive. Once they go out of print, I don't have the money
no,
to
yeah.
reprint
I was gonna
them.
say, you realize you're like doing really low numbers, right? Like most people put their base digital, they do at least 5. And then for your
Yeah,
physical, they're doing at least 20. So you're
yeah,
going low. For the poster, 12, for the whole
yeah.
shebang, 25 or something like that. Like what's for the bundle?
Yeah, that's the 12. Yeah, the bundle, the poster and the comic art is 12. 12 is the highest buy.
For both of them, it's only 12?
Yeah,
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 yeah, you're way low.
that's the buy-in. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
I do go low because I'm still in the building phase of I'm trying to get people into this. So I don't mind taking a hit here and there, and I don't print huge numbers. Like that's another thing I want to talk to you about in private is printing numbers, because when I start doing these dispensaries and head shops and stuff, I want to print in the hundreds.
Yeah,
And
but you do the conventions and stuff, and you're saying you're like selling out like 600 plus of the DVDs. I feel like,
the comics don't move that well.
oh, okay. Dang. That's, see, so, yeah, for a
The
second,
comics
I
move.
do want to talk about that then, because like with me, I kind of, in, with movies, I had like the revelation to where, it's like you're making no budget movies. And like you said, then all of a sudden you realize, man, it's expensive to make these no budget movies because they actually aren't zero. So then you're like, well, what can I do if I try to legitly make, once I had a full-time job and like was sort of making, like a real salary and was like, okay, I have 10 grand to spend and I want to make movies because just like you, my whole life, no matter what I was doing, if I wasn't doing something creative, I was just like losing my mind. And
Right.
I was like, so of course, any extra money I had was going towards trying to make a movie or that I was writing. And then you sort of do that research and you realize, okay, um, that's basically all going to go towards, like post production or something. Like you're still going to like it's still too little. But
Yeah.
that's whenever I
Well, people,
discovered,
people, people would ask me if you had $1 million, what kind of movie would you make? I'm like, $1 million isn't going to make my movies any different. It's just going to mean everybody gets paid, and then
yeah,
there's more, like you said, more post production work or maybe a better camera. But I'm going to make this. I'm still going to make a talkie. I'm
yeah,
not going to
it's
make.
gonna be the
I'm
same
not going to
movie,
make.
but you can afford to pay for a theatrical run or something.
Yeah,
Like there's so much. Yeah, but we'll make a whole nother video talking more deep into both of the actual nitty gritty kind of the numbers side of things after you
sure.
and I talk privately. But I did want to say, like the whole point I was getting at is like once I was like, okay, I can make a movie for basically bare minimum like 20,000. And I was like, at that time, that's a huge amount of money, like way more than I can risk. So it's
Yeah,
like, but then I kind of started getting to people, they're like, well, you don't have to do it all yourself. Like you can still go through a normal independent route and raise that money. And like basically get 2,000 here, 2,000 there, get tax credits here, something there. Um, and so I was like, okay, I'll actually budget out a movie and it was a movie I wrote. It was all in one location. It was like about as simple as you could get it, and but it was really good. And long story short, it got optioned by somebody in India, like a company in India, and they were like right away gonna make it. And I wanted like control of it, so I like became a producer of it. To cut the story short again, that movie didn't get made. But then whenever I realized like the budget, because whenever you thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get paid, like my contract's for 10% of whatever, and then you realize like, oh, but the budget's only at that time, I think like the budget was that they were considering it like for maybe 30,000. But to me, I was like, that's like I could make that. Like I can fund that. Like I don't need to go through all these motions to get 10% where like if I'm already a producer, like I'll put up 20 and then you guys come up with 10 kind of thing. And
yeah,
then just to cut back to all that, I didn't go through with all that at the time, but instead I put all my time and effort into a graphic novel and realized like they cost about the same amount, but I actually was successful and made money with that. And
right,
so I continued down that route. Plus, I started to actually get like recognize like credibility in that space. So I considered going down that route. Um, but that I forget where I was going with this, but it was basically just like I was like kind of the opposite to where it was like to me it was like it's like the movies were cheaper than graphic novels. So now I'm like, what kind of good movie can I make again for the same amount? Like now that I actually kind of know what I'm doing, which brings me to me like, do you plan on going back to movies at all?
I don't say I'll never say no to anything, but I'm really comfortable doing comics right now. I'm having a ton of fun.
Yeah.
My style's getting better because I work every single day. I'm actually doing the thumbnails for my next comic right now, Dracula in Strangeville.
Ooh.
And I do everything. I sketch everything out on little 3x5 note cards, and then I blow them up into the big Bristol board um,
Whoa.
pages like that. But I just I'm just nonstop grinding and doing comics right now. Like I have, not only do we have the Death to Strangeville Indiegogo, which, did I say that you could go to the link tree and
Hmm.
see everything? The web comic, the graphic, the Indiegogo, my website, my Facebook, my Instagram, all that stuff is all on the link tree. Um, I've got the next year worth of Indiegogo crowdfunders planned out. Um, I've basically spent about the last 6 8 months doing drawing comics that haven't come out yet, and so I've got this pipeline of crowdfunders, and then I'm going to try to move them into the physical head shops and comic shops and that, and just back and forth and back and forth. And so I don't have plans per se to make another film. I did my last graphic novel, which is my longest book, Space Worms, which is a 165 page big chonker graphic novel. This originally started out as a screenplay. And I was kicking after we did that really successful Kansas City Crypticon show. I ended up having to order 600 DVDs to sort of, fill the need for my movies out there on the convention scene. I was like, okay, we can do this. We can make another movie. Like this is going to be the resurgence of hack movies. And I wrote two screenplays. I wrote Kevin Strange's Space Worms, and then I wrote a sequel to Colonel Kill called Camp Kill Motherfuckers. And and we talked a little bit. There was a financer out of Kansas City that wanted to put in $5,000, but $5,000 isn't really going to buy. $5,000 is going to buy you um, like Kane Hodder for a weekend. $5,000 is going to buy you one name that you can use for 3 days. That you
Hmm.
can fly. They'll fly in and they'll do anything you want to for about 3 days, and then they're gone forever. That's about all $5,000 was going to do. And I told him that. I was like, well, that's not going to pay for a movie, but that'll pay for an appearance from somebody we could put on the cover. And you know me, like I could write them a crazy fucking something they've never done before. The Kevin Strange version of Kane Hodder ain't going to be like anything you've ever fucking seen, you know, you know, before. So we talked about that, and I started working on that screenplay, and it just never happened. There's because I don't have any filmmaking sort of the reason movies like Cockhammer can get made is because you make 5 movies before that movie, and you just roll one into the next, and you start making connections, and industry folk and actors and actresses start coming out of the woodwork, driving 5 hours to work with you because they saw your work here or there, or saw a screening at a convention, and you're doing conventions, and you're meeting indie folk that are super enthusiastic about wanting to do your stuff, and you can put something together, and it just sort of everyone sort of comes at you, and it happens. To go cold where I'm at right now in my career, if I write this Space Worm screenplay, and it's like, so what? Like I don't have anyone gravitating towards me to facilitate that. It would be something that's going to take a lot of effort. I'm going to have to put the brakes on pretty much everything else and
Yeah.
focus on trying to get, and maybe make a short film first, make a couple of short films, something over a weekend that I can do to just, and maybe start sending that out to uh, film festivals to try to get some buzz back about the Kevin Strange film career before I could really put focus on a feature. If that, I mean, that's about as good of an answer, as authentic
Nah.
of an answer as I can give you. Is there's just not any momentum in that direction right now. The momentum's all in the comic direction.
No, I totally get you. It's such an undertaking. It's and especially since you're doing all the artwork yourself and you're being consistent and growing. Like there's no reason to jump off that train to try to do something else.
Well, the reason is because more people are going to watch a movie. They're going to read a comic book, right? Like
I mean,
anytime you make a movie, it's going to be the movie is the medium. Movies are the medium that draw the masses
hmm
in the numbers. If you're your dream, your goal is to get as many eyeballs on your art as you can, you make a movie.
Well, I will join your team. If we actually, yeah, I'll talk offline and yeah, I got all kinds of ideas that I feel like if I'm a few years away to where I can sort of like spend almost all my time doing this creative stuff. And I have enough of a network now to where if I start a snowball going, like I can get things moving up pretty big, pretty fast. The big drawback now is just like it's extremely hard to. I just have two little kids, and when you have like just a steady day job that is too hard to say no to spend. I mean, as people know in this creative career, like it is more than a full-time job, and you get less than a part-time job's worth of pay out of it.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and yet it's still worth it to us. And there's very little people that are right in the middle to where you're just steady, putting in the work and getting in like a steady salary. It's few
Well,
between. You're either extreme to where you're just like you own your own IP and everything you do is just a super ultra success, or you're struggling every quarter, every month to like you might have one success and then the next year you're still trying to hope, bank off that success because you don't have anything new that's bringing in new numbers. It's a
right.
grind, this whole thing. And
Well, that's what I tell
power to
people.
you.
I tell people exactly that. There is no middle class artist. You are either dirt poor, scrounging up pennies, donating blood to just to get your rent paid to try to keep these things, keep the creative stuff coming out, or you're ultra mega famous and rich and can do anything you want.
Yeah.
There is no in between. It's
No.
one or the other. One or the other. And it's crazy how it happens too, because for some people, it happens overnight. Eastman and Laird drew Ninja Turtles, and Ninja Turtles was the success that would then go on to become a multi-billion-dollar global phenomenon for decades to come. Some people, it takes 20 years of grinding before um, anything happens for them. I'm unfortunately in the latter category, but I don't care. And I said that back then. That the reason I'm still doing what I'm doing today is because my attitude back then was I'll work a part-time food service job for the rest of my life if it means the other part-time. Yeah, I'll do 25 hours a week of uh, humiliating food service if that means that 25 hours a week I can spend creating these crazy Troma-esque worlds uncompromised. The thing about the Strangeville Stonerverse is it's uncompromised, it's unfiltered and uncompromised. I have never once had to pull a punch, cut a joke, censor a titty, or anything. My universe is completely pure, and I've paid dearly for that. I don't make mainstream stuff that could have. I could at certain times I could have made things that were more mainstream that would have maybe gotten more successful, but I chose to stay underground, and I chose to stay in this, you know, extreme horror isn't the word for it, but underground horror comedy, absurdity. I chose to stay here where there are fewer opportunities to make money, but many, many more opportunities to create authentic art.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, but authenticity has more of a power to it, I feel. And
Well,
it
it's forever.
eventually it gets recognized.
Yeah, it's even if it's not in my lifetime, the thing that drove me to a creative lifestyle to begin with was just the comfort in knowing that these things are forever. This book is going to exist forever no matter what happens to me. It might take 50 years after I'm dead before this book gets appreciated, but it will eventually, or maybe it won't, but the opportunity for it to for this stuff to find its audience is perpetual. There is
Mhm.
no end date on they there's something Zoomers on the internet like to talk about. They like to talk about passive income, and you got to get your passive income going, bro, so you can spend your time doing the things you love. Well, there's nothing more passive income than making this kind of stuff, because I still sell copies when I go out on the conventions. One of the things that sells the best on my table is Dream Reaper the movie, the first
First one.
feature-length movie I made in 2006, and it's not good. And I try to tell people, please buy Cockhammer or Nixon Hogan Smoke Christmas. That those are the better movies. And they say this is something about this is calling to me. And one of my biggest super fans, give a shout out to him right now, to Super Strangeville Strangehead Drew. He likes to watch Dream Reaper twice a week. He says he's got the whole movie memorized, and he'll quote it to me in my fucking DMs. I'll be going on about my day, and my phone will go ding, and I'll pick it up, and it's quotes from Dream Reaper, the movie from 2006. It's almost 20 years old. I don't even remember. I don't remember half the shit. Sometimes I'm like, what is he talking? Oh, that's a quote from my movie from 20 years ago that I barely remember making. It's like that's the one of the gifts that you get being an artist, is that it's forever.
Yeah, that's awesome. Uh, well, it looks like we got to wrap up. But like I said, yeah, we're gonna have to talk offline, and we'll definitely have to have you back on.
Yeah.
And thanks a lot for doing this, man.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was a great time. Great conversation.
Yeah, for sure.